From UFO abductions to visiting spirits from the beyond, many folklore tales of the unknown have had paranormal enthusiasts and critics debating the existence and probability of supernatural encounters for decades. But one legend in particular has baffled supporters and skeptics alike for over 200 years. Today, on Scream to Screen, we uncover the history of the Bell Witch legend and how its impact on our understanding of paranormal phenomena helped revive an entire subgenre of American horror cinema. But first, don't forget to subscribe to The Graveyard Shift for more real-life horror stories that made it to the big screen. The Bell Witch haunting is a legend from southern United States folklore, centered around the 19th century Bell family of northwest Robertson County, Tennessee. Farmer John Bell Sr. resided with his family along the Red River in an area currently near the town of Adams. According to the legend, from 1817 to 1821, his family and the local area came under attack by a mostly invisible entity that was able to speak, shapeshift, and affect the physical environment. Some accounts record the spirit to also have been clairvoyant and capable of crossing long distances with superhuman speed. In 1894, newspaper editor Martin V. Ingram published a book called An Authenticated History of the Bell Witch, which was widely regarded as the first full-length record of the legend and a primary source for subsequent treatments. The individuals recorded in the work were known historical personalities. In modern times, some skeptics have regarded Ingram's efforts as a work of historical fiction or fraud. Other researchers consider Ingram's work a nascent folklore study and an accurate reflection of belief in the region during the 19th century. While not a fundamental element of the original recorded legend, the Bell Witch Cave in the 20th century became a source of continuing interest, belief, and generation of lore. Contemporary artistic interpretations, such as in film and music, have expanded the reach of the legend beyond the regional confines of the southern United States. In his book on the history of the Bell Witch, Martin V. Ingram published that the poltergeist's name was Kate, after the entity claimed at one point to be old Kate Batts' witch, and continued to respond favorably to the name. The physical activity centered on the Bell's youngest daughter, Betsy, and her father, and expressed particular displeasure when Betsy became engaged to a local named Joshua Gardner. The haunting began sometime in 1817, when John Bell Sr. first witnessed the apparition of a strange creature resembling a dog. Bell fired at the animal before it disappeared. The Bell family began witnessing other strange occurrences following the isolated event. At one point, John's son, Drew Bell, approached what appeared to be an unknown bird perched on a fence before it flew away and revealed it was an extraordinary size, too big to be a normal bird. Betsy Bell later observed a girl in a green dress swinging from a limb of an oak tree, but nobody in the family could identify the young girl. Activity later moved into the Bell household, with knocking heard alongside the door and walls. The family reported hearing sounds of gnawing on the beds, invisible dogs fighting, and chains along the floor. About this time, John Bell began experiencing paralysis in the mouth. The phenomena grew in intensity as the sheets were pulled from beds while the children slept. Soon, the entity pulled hair and scratched the children, with particular emphasis on Betsy, who was slapped, pinched, and stuck with pins. The Bells turned to family friend James Johnston for help, who, after experiencing the same phenomena one night while staying at the Bells' home, claimed it to be a spirit like in the Bible. Soon, word of the haunting spread, with some traveling great distances to witness the witch. The apparition began to speak out loud when addressed, answering in a feeble voice that it was a spirit that was once happy, but is now disturbed. The spirit offered diverse explanations of its presence, tying its origins to the disturbance of a Native American burial mound located on the property. With the emergence of full conversations, the spirit repeated word for word 2 sermons that were given 13 miles apart at the same time. The entity was well acquainted with the biblical text and appeared to enjoy religious arguments. For amusement, the witch would share gossip about activities in other households, and at times appeared to leave for brief moments to visit homes after an inquiry. James Johnston's son, John Johnston, devised a test for the witch, asking the entity what his Dutch step-grandmother in North Carolina would say in a certain scenario. The apparition then responded in Johnston's grandmother's thick accent, an impression no one outside of his family would have known about. In another account, an Englishman stopped to visit and offered to investigate. On remarking on his family's overseas, the entity known as Kate suddenly began to mimic his English parents. The witch woke him up early the following morning to the voices of his parents, worried as they heard his voice as well. The Englishman quickly left that morning and later wrote to the Bell family to apologize for his skepticism, as the entity had visited the entire family in England. The spirit claimed she intended to kill John Bell Sr., referring to him as Old Jack, and signaled this intention through curses, threats, and afflictions. The story climaxes with the Bell patriarch being poisoned by the witch. Afterward, the entity interrupted the mourners by singing drinking songs. In 1821, as a result of the witch's entreatment, Betsy Bell called off her engagement with Joshua Gardner. Subsequently, the entity told the family it was going to leave, but returned 7 years later in 1828. The witch began making contact with Lucy Bell and her sons, Richard and Joel, with similar activities as before, but they chose not to engage, and the spirit appeared to leave again. Several accounts claim that during his military career, Andrew Jackson was intrigued with the story, and his men were frightened after traveling to investigate. The account of General Jackson's visit was covered in Ingram's novel through a letter from an attorney in Clarksville named Thomas L. Yancey, dated January 1894. In the letter, Yancey explained that his grandfather, Whitmore Fort, was a witness to the phenomena at the Bell homestead and related the story to Jackson's visit to Yancey when he was young. As the story goes, the Bell family were strained of resources from visitors, and Jackson brought a wagon load of supplies with his men. Nearing the homestead, the wagon stopped and appeared fastened to the position despite considerable effort by several men to free it. After a metallic voice was heard in the vegetation telling the general to let the wagon move, the horses began walking again on their own. Instead of camping out, Jackson's party stayed at the Bell home that evening in hopes to encounter the witch herself. According to Fort's account, among the Jackson party was a witch layer who boasted of his supernatural exploits until the entity arrived and taunted him to shoot her. When the man's gun would not fire, the witch apparently beat him and led him out of the door by his nose before warning Andrew Jackson personally that she would uncover another rascal the next night. Jackson's men chose to leave for home the following morning, each one fearing he was next. According to the paranormal investigator Ben Radford, the Bell Witch story shows how easily legend and myth can be mistaken for fact and reveal events and how easily the lines are blurred when sources are not checked. In his book titled The Bell Witch Mystery, Radford reminds readers that the burden of proof does not fall on skeptics to disprove anything, but rather for proponents to show evidence of their claims. Brian Dunning, an American author and producer who focuses on science and skepticism, wrote that there was no need to discuss the supposed paranormal activity until there was evidence that the story was true. According to Dunning, all the significant facts of the story of the Bell Witch have been falsified, and the others come from a source of dubious credibility. Since no reliable documentation of any actual events exist, there is nothing worth looking into. He concludes by chalking up the Bell Witch as nothing more than one of many unsubstantiated folk legends, vastly embellished and popularized by an opportunistic author of historical fiction. Radford and Dunning also both concluded that there is no evidence that Andrew Jackson ever visited the Bell family home in the first place. During the years in question, Jackson's movements were well documented, and nowhere in history or his writings has there been evidence of his knowledge of the Bell family. According to Dunning, the 1824 presidential election was notoriously malicious, and it seems hard to believe that his opponent would have overlooked the opportunity to drag him through the mud for having lost a fight with a witch. Carl Lindell, affiliated with the University of Houston, writes that the Andrew Jackson encounter is an example of how belief and history mix together in the formation of legend. Such legends, which may persist in a locale for generations, upon receiving media treatment can spread far outside the area where the legend originated. Paranormal skeptic Joe Nickel notes that many of those who knew Betsy Bell suspected her of fraud, and the legend itself sounds suspiciously like an example of poltergeist faking syndrome, in which a person, typically a child, delivers falsified claims of paranormal phenomenon for attention. Amy Fluker, a researcher of the Mississippi version of the legend, has expressed that the Bell Witch legend has other value. As a historian of collective memory, she claims that it matters very little to her research if hauntings are real or not, but it does matter if people believe they are real. As a result, their accounts can help us understand the perspectives of 19th and 20th century Americans. There have been several movies based, at least in part, on or around the Bell Witch legend. A former film critic for The Independent, Roger Clark, argues the legend has also had a measurable influence on cinema, such as the Poltergeist film series, The Witch released in 2015, and the trope of burial ground disturbance in the Amityville Horror. One of the most direct interpretations of the legend, however, would have to come from 1999's The Blair Witch Project, which follows 3 film students investigating their own fictitious witch legend. The success of the Blair Witch Project single-handedly revived the found footage subgenre of horror cinema, paving the way for films like Cloverfield and Paranormal Activity franchise, which also received heavy influence from the Legend of the Bell Witch hauntings. The Legend of the Bell Witch has also popped up in various television series. The American paranormal show Ghost Adventures filmed an episode at the Bell Witch Cave, and A&E Network released a mini-series in 2015 titled Cursed: The Bell Witch. The series followed selected descendants of the Bell family trying to end the curse. Whether you believe the claims made by the Bell family and various other sources over the last 200 years, or you fall in line with Brian Dunning and Ben Radford's critical skepticism, the legend of the Bell Witch is one of the country's greatest unsolved mysteries and will undoubtedly live on in American folklore for generations to come. So, what do you think? Is there some truth to the legend, or have paranormal enthusiasts fallen prey to one of the biggest attention-seeking cons in history? Let us know your opinion in the comments, and remember to like and subscribe to The Graveyard Shift for all your horror news. And join us next time to find out what other supernatural phenomena will make you scream to scream.